Yesterday, the Liberals and the NDP came to what they call a supply and confidence agreement. Joining me now to share the Conservative perspective on this agreement and what the Conservatives will now do to hold the government to account is Conservative House Leader John Brassard. I guess I'll start out with your interim leader, Candice Bergen, put out a statement yesterday as this was released. Kind of more of the details were coming out as it relates to this supply and confidence agreement. But in the statement, she called it a coalition numerous times. I'm just, I guess, as a first question, how do you see this supply and confidence agreement as a coalition, seeing as how a coalition would mean having seats around the cabinet table?
Yeah, that's a great question, Wyatt. And first of all, it's great to be here. I know we've tried to come on a couple of times and just the timing wasn't right, but I'm glad everything worked out today. If you read the agreement, it clearly defines a relationship between the New Democratic Party, who's the fourth party in the House of Commons. Only 18% of Canadians voted for the NDP in the last election, 82% did not. The agreement talks about the meetings between the NDP leader and the Prime Minister on a quarterly basis. It talks about whips meetings, both whips of the parties. House leaders will be meeting, as well as the formation of a new committee, an ad hoc committee of parliamentarians and members of parliament who will be meeting on a monthly basis to determine the outcome of the processes that they've agreed to. And so this is a really unusual relationship in parliamentary history. It's never happened before, where you've got a member of the fourth party who are actually aligned and connected to the members of the government. And so, they can call it whatever they want, a supply agreement. It is effectively a coalition because the NDP now has access to information, Wyatt, that the opposition, the official opposition party, does not have access to, nor does the Bloc Québécois, as a result of this agreement. And so I know what they want to call it, a supply agreement, but it is effectively a coalition. The other thing that's important about this as well is on the committee work, which is effectively the NDP, the opposition parties have the majority on committees. The NDP has agreed to not to impede the work of the government within committees and to effectively give the government a heads up on anything that they deem as being impeding the government in their work on committees. So that goes against everything that the committee is supposed to do. The NDP is part of the opposition in a minority government, which Canadians elected in September. The New Democratic Party were part of the opposition. Now they've effectively become part of the government on committees. And any of the work of the committees will be impeded by this new majority of the NDP and Liberal coalition on committees, which means that committees who have a tremendous amount of power under the standing orders, like the production of documents, ordering the production of documents, like in the Winnipeg Lab scandal, could now be overruled as a result of what is now a majority on the committees between the NDP and the Liberal coalition.
And one of the two of the main things that were in this agreement that was released yesterday was dental care and pharmacare, which is obviously things that, as the NDP describes it, things they've been, calling for a long time. The Liberals have mentioned in the past doing something similar to it. Now they seem to have come to an agreement on that. I guess, where is the Conservatives at in terms of, these pharmacare and dental care programs? And seeing as how the majority of the members within the House of Commons now have come to an agreement over pharmacare and dental care, how should those policies be enacted?
Yeah, and I think the primary concern there is the centralization of power to the federal government as it relates to pharmacare and dental care. There is a long way to go. I mean, look, successive governments have been talking about a pharmacare and dental care program, including Liberal governments dating back to the Jean Chrétien government. And it's been difficult to implement for two reasons. Number one, the cost. It comes with a significant price tag. And the second thing is because of provincial autonomy and provincial powers. The provincial government, every provincial government and territorial government in the country has some form of dental care program for high risk, low income Canadians. And so right now, I think the number is over 80% of Canadians are covered by some form of dental care program. And for those that aren't covered, many of them are covered through these provincial programs, whether people are on disability or are low income Canadians, they're covered by this. So the centralization of this power, everything coming through the federal government, the significant cost, the added cost of a program like this going forward, when the country right now is $400 billion in deficits and $1.3 trillion in debt, this is going to add to the already incredible burden that working class Canadians are paying for through their taxation and will continue to pay for as a result of these types of programs. So it's very aspirational what they've agreed to, and I think it's going to take a long time to implement, if they're able to implement this at all.
And just one final question. You mentioned earlier in the interview that this hasn't been done, at least in the House of Commons, for a fairly long time. But we can look at other examples of, where something at least broadly similar to what the Liberals and NDP have signed on to. We can look to other examples that are broadly similar. One of them would be in 2017 in British Columbia, when the BC NDP and the BC Green Party came together to ultimately make a coalition or something similar to this. In this case,
call it what it is, Wyatt. Call it what it is.
Something similar to this. And so I guess just more specifically, obviously you don't support this agreement, but in terms of what the government can do to make it better, do you think they should be looking at examples such as that?
Well, BC, and you're quite right, there was an example in BC where this situation happened. Of course, that agreement fell through. They went to an election. The BC NDP party ended up winning a majority, and I think the Greens were effectively wiped out at that point. There was nothing that was being done in the House of Commons. And I know, if you talk to the Liberal House leader, he'll tell you that there was obstruction, there was toxicity, there was all kinds of things that were happening. The fact is that the Liberals, because they had the NDP in their hip pocket in advance of this agreement, were able to legislatively move through some of those pieces of legislation that they wanted to. So there was nothing in this agreement that couldn't have been done otherwise. The issue is, and this is what Canadians need to be made aware of, is that on September 20th of 2021, Canadians elected a minority Liberal government. They didn't elect a majority Liberal government. They elected an NDP party to end up in fourth place, only 18% of Canadians. So Justin Trudeau, who desperately wanted a majority in the last election, didn't get one because Canadians didn't send him one. Now decided to end up in this backroom shady deal with the NDP to get the majority that he was seeking just 6 months ago that Canadians denied. So it is, it's more than obviously disturbing for us because this is not the way the election turned out. And these type of backroom deals, I don't think Canadians like these types of things. I really don't. I think they purposely sent the Liberals to minority status once again. And that was the expectation. So there was no need for this to happen. The Liberals were, if they wanted to, they could have passed any legislation that they wanted as long as the NDP agreed with them. And in many cases, in the first 6 months of this new parliament, the NDP agreed, not the least of which was on the Emergencies Act invocation. So they had the NDP squarely in their hip pocket, and for some reason they decided to do this because now they've got a majority government effectively for the next 3.5 years.
Okay, that is Conservative House Leader John Brassard. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been great chatting with you.
My pleasure, Wyatt. Anytime, and let's do this again, okay?